That's really lovely, Douglas. You know, um, once again, like this has happened a couple of times, where the personality of the orchestrator is very individual, even when evoking Beethoven, right? Sort of channeling Beethoven's personality. So I just, I really love a lot of what's going on here. I'm going to point out just a couple of things I observed really quickly while they're fresh in my mind after having reviewed your score again, um, before getting ready for just one final analysis and recording this. Just a couple things. The harmony's a little funky right here. These should be B flats, right? Not B naturals, right? And there are a couple other strange bits of off harmony here and there, and I'm wondering why. But yeah, and there are a couple of kind of strange dovetailings that don't quite work. Like for instance, pushing forward to a forte, which this note will be blasting by the time we get to the same sounding F in the first violin, so that won't be an even, that won't be a nice even dovetailing note. It won't feel like that the lines are merging one into the other. It's just going to feel like the first violins are kind of picking up from the same idea in their own way, right? So it doesn't really connect, right? Better to have them dovetail on the same exact dynamic and then push forwards, right? Yeah, so just one thing before we launch into this again, I'm wondering if this is a Muse Muse score and one of the Muse score sound sets, because I'm running across it more and more. I think I ran across it in the 2022, maybe 2021, and definitely 2022 orchestration challenges, and that's a very kind of weak, very very finger hole sound heavy kind of approximation of the clarinet voice here. Yeah, I'm finding it more and more hard to accept, and I think just in general, like whoever set up this sound set for the winds, they were really trying to get into the individual personalities of the different woodwinds as they saw it, but they ended up not having a wind sound that is really compatible in a kind of a larger scale with the rest of the orchestra. Do you see what I'm saying? It doesn't, like with the note performer sounds, they have a certain generic quality, which is not the greatest in solos, but in terms of like core playing, it's actually it's a pretty good approximation. I mean, of course, it's not going to really show you what will happen with the orchestra, but it's close enough for you to make a pretty good guesstimate, right? So yeah, this just that. So I'm just curious if you could let me know, Douglas, like what sound set you used, what application this is. Like if you were to say, okay, well this is MuseScore and that's their standard, I would just know, and that would kind of help me because with MuseScore you can make suggestions, and depending on who is making the suggestion, I think the more weight it carries. So for instance, I'm friends with a music professor who's one of their one of the people who makes a lot of suggestions for improving and so on and so forth. And we've just worked on one particular aspect. And so if I knew this was something that was unique to MuseScore, then I could make that. So all right. So not to get too sidetracked on that. So let's go into the evaluation of your entry. Okay. So just like once again, I really liked it. I thought that there was a lot of really great stuff here. I think in a real situation, real instruments, and this kind of doubling of clarinets and violins, you would get like a very like even at a softer dynamic, you get a very direct, very earthy kind of a sound. not quite the same as the very slashing kind of mezzo forte to forte kind of a sound of matching these two voices together, blending them, but just more, but very very intense. Like the problem with the way that the sound set is interpreting this is it's just like really mostly clarinet, and it has like not only does the clarinet overwhelm the strings here, but it also has that kind of weird, it's overwhelming it with its weak tone, right? With its sort of, yeah, it's almost as if it never quite gets to a firm tone. It always kind of backs off and submerges itself into itself, right? I don't know, like you'd have to listen to it to again to see what I'm talking about. Like a real live clarinet player would never do that, and anybody recording the clarinet from like a meter away would not pick up that just that very tone hole heavy kind of a sound. Yeah, so however they did the sound shaping, I feel that they made a mistake. With all respect to the sound designer. But the construction here is quite interesting. The C basso horns, the horns in F, and that's one way of taking care of it. I would almost feel like you could have used second bassoon for these low tones and used your first bassoon to double the violas to get a more even blended tone, right? Yeah, and then you could have continued on with first clarinet and then just continued on with like the that doubling scheme without having to turn this into the viola and second violin voices. And then here you got to tell us, is this first clarinet, or I mean you're trying to be pretty good with it. Here when you go to solo, you have to tell us who is playing the solo, like number one solo, right? Can't just say solo. Solo doesn't mean the first player, right? It means one of these players is playing a solo. So you have to specify who is the soloist. Just like this, just take this number one, put it in front of the word solo, and then you have accomplished your goal. So, getting back to the whole question of, does this set the mood effectively? I mean, I feel it does, because it's a sort of a hyper-realistic string sound, right? Whenever you put clarinets in a blending kind of a sound, and then if you were to follow my advice and add bassoon as well, then you get this very intense, direct, earthy kind of a string sound. And then like going from there to here, right? You have like an unadorned string sound. So it's a nice contrast, right? There will be a difference even if the lower wind players make a real effort to submerge their tone into the strings. Now, going forward, here's something that's completely unnecessary: marking up the the violins to mezzo piano over the piano lower strings. It's absolutely not needed. Everybody should be at the same dynamic. It's just because of the way that everybody's seated in the string section, there will be the balance that you need in order to bring out these elements melodically, right? So, does the melody start with elegance? You have some nice long bows over your string parts. I would almost say, like, so down, up, down, and this is kind of nice. Up, down. So I wouldn't change a single thing about this, right? You might want to like change this to shorter bows, but like it works the way that it is too. And here I would say just add a slur over these tenuto marks, these tenuto notes, to make it portato. And that way, so if you get the up bow pushing forwards in the crescendo, that's the best. And then the release on the down bow. So that works with the kind of natural energy of the bow. So all that said, you have a very simple, very direct transcription of the piano part. And I would say that's elegant. right? So melody starting with elegant, yes. Natural flow in the accompaniment, yes. Expanding without clogging up, especially since you're not adding any other elements, yes. And natural transition to octaves is just built right into the way that you transcribed it. Okay, so ticks all the boxes off, although, like the only regret is there are no other orchestral elements at play until you get to here. So it's not that you are incapable of writing more in, it's just that you decided to hold off on them, right? And that is a judgment call. That's your own aesthetics, right? So here's where I would say personality of the orchestrator is starting to assert itself more than perhaps the personality of Beethoven, who always liked to use, like he might have an opening statement, but then he would cushion it with winds or back it up with winds a little bit just to give it a little bit more color. So it's neither wrong nor right? It's your take on it, right? Which I think is artistically valid. So continuing on, you really keep it in the strings. I just keep everything in the strings, and that's fine. Two possible problems here. One is, I would say, do not remove the words leggermente from the instruments which are going to be playing 16th notes, right? Because it is a state of mind, right? It's an attitude. He's telling the players, I want you to be agile. I want you to be, I want you to be projecting a sense of deftness and agility, right? When you take that away, it just becomes, they'll add that or they won't. But with, adding in what Beethoven said, leggermente, to these parts ensures that they will have that attitude. So you don't contrast at all with the theme, with the main theme. You just basically continue on in strings, and that's fine. That's, once again, it's a judgment call. Neither judging that to be better or worse than anything else. Yeah, and going da 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 da, then fresh bow da. Yeah, that's nice. And having a little bit, like if you want this this tenuto to be a nice long full bow, then have the slur break on the note before, right? So they can go up, down, up, right, and just have a nice, like a tenuto for the string player. A tenuto means a nice full straight bow, just like completely inhabiting that whole thing. And the bow might be moving a little fast. It's almost like zoom, like the word zoom, right? It keeps up the energy all the way through, and the easiest way to do that is to have the bow move fast, okay? Now, it's different when you have a slur over a tenuto that implies a kind of a portato thing, at least when you have two or three of them in a row, right? Which is why I was suggesting that here. But I would just say, just move the slur endpoint back one, and then you get a nice sort of, at a piano, a nice medium kind of a slash there at the end. Da-da-da-da-da-da, zoom, da-da-da-da, zoom, right? Okay, and then da-da-da-da. I really love the way that you push into this. You tell us that you're going to mezzo forte, right? Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. The octave is great. The very simple harmonic density right in here, just as it is in the piano part, setting up exactly what you're about to do. I would say in this case, mark piano subito, so that there's no question, especially if you're working with, say, like a semi-pro or university orchestra or some other kind of less than top professional orchestra, just that they absolutely know they're immediately going to go. They're going to fall off the dynamic cliff here and just da 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 da. Right? You want that, and if you don't want that, you better mark a diminuendo. Okay, and then this is perfect, exactly right. See, so just this portato should go here, that same style, right? Same exact notes too. All right, so yeah, and then here's where you get into trouble with the harmony. Do the harmony the way Beethoven had it, okay? And then we have just those very simple elements again, da da dum, and then a fuller, almost a tutti here, bum bum bum, da 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 da. So how are you going to, like I mentioned before, how are you going to dovetail on a forte quarter note to a piano quarter note in the strings when you have a very, very intensely individualistic sound dovetailing to a homogeneous sound in the strings, which are softer in general in their impact, their general impact, right? So it would have been better for you to go da 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 da, and don't push it all. Like the timbre of the clarinet up there on that written G is just beautiful. It doesn't need a big push. And if you do want to put a little energy into it, I would say start the hairpin a little earlier and then have it tail off back to piano. And you don't need to mark this mezzo piano. You can just stay at piano, right? And then picking it up, then you get a better less you get a more seamless kind of a handoff from one instrument color to the other. And then here, da 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 da. Okay, watch out about ardue colliding with your notes here. And and here, like once again, there's zero need for you to be marking some pitches mezzo piano and some piano. Just have everybody be piano here. And just as I mentioned before, this has got to be B flat. Right. Yeah. And this is kind of nice. Here I would mark this. I would be really careful about restetta, 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 restetta. It's not the. It would be better for the violinist to be going C sharp, B flat, not B, A, da 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 da, because like they really want to feel where the downbeat is. They want to actually play the downbeat. So da 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 da, right? Rather than go da 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 da. You're not really going incredibly fast here at 120, but it still is irritating, and it does affect the precision that everybody else can play. But this is all great, see, because you're going da 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 da, yeah, and that works really, really great. I've mentioned it before. Here would have been a really good opportunity for you to go using your C horns, right? You could have gone stopped G sharp, open G. So and as far as the accents are concerned, you don't even need to accent anything except for the kind of tone, right? Because that's really the if you look at the way that I'm assuming you're a pianist, if you actually play the original score on piano, what you find is that is that your middle finger will be sitting in the middle of those chords, right, as they play. So it's the fingering will be like 3-5-1 on the accented chord, and then 5-3-1, and then it'll be 5-4-1 on the non-accented chord. So that means that the weight is going to, like, when your hand has a tendency to just put all the weight in the middle or on the thumb, right? So in this case, just the way the chord is shaped with the black keys on the outside and everything, the more weight will fall right in the middle on that white key, that G double sharp, right? So anyway, so that I think that's the intention there with Beethoven. He just really wants that middle note to stand out. So if that is the case, you might as well just give it to like your, give it to like stopped, open, stopped, open. But if we're just thinking of like just the general specifics of this, complementary timbre, I think that works out pretty good with clarinet and bassoon, or clarinets and bassoon. The thing you have to worry about here with ardue clarinets is that like they will like the way that you've got them here, they're essentially they're doubling the violas, but since they are like the violas are going right, and the clarinets are going, you know what I mean? The clarinets, the tendency of a duet clarinets to phase will be very, very prominent here. And I would say, there is almost never a need for bassoons in this kind of configuration to ever play a duet in tenor in the tenor register. So you'd be better off with just a single clarinet and a single bassoon until you get to this place right here with the which necessitates an interval, which is fine. All right. And then like you're sort of thinking about it. I like the way you add these little accented notes on top. That's once again I think we're sort of channeling Beethoven a little bit. So here we're getting to the need for a B natural, right? So like you jumped the gun on the B natural. Maybe you'd scored this out and you like thought back on this and say, wait, shouldn't this be B natural too? And maybe you didn't refer back to the score. Yeah. So very cool. This is interesting. Dun 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 dun. That works. Okay. Yeah, and then just dun 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 dun. Right. Yeah. So that's all great. And then building into this and like just really laying off of the natural brass until you're starting to approach, and just giving us the whammy right here, and then sforzando crescendo to fortissimo. That's a really good way to manage the energy here. Keep in mind, sforzando fortissimo, right? Rolling forward, the player will, they may treat this as fortissimo anyway, right? Like, the roll. So maybe you don't need a double F there. Right, just sforzando along with everybody else, and then push forward to the fortissimo because you just want the bam, brum, right? So so don't overdo it. So I really like once again, this is one of those things that I really liked about about this score. I felt that this was nicely organized and had a really great driving rhythm going forwards, right? Okay, now here you're saying, with the first player, so you want this to be all solos, right? So, I mean, that's very, very cool, but keep in mind that you're setting a bit of a task for your conductor, which you yourself should outline. I was noticing something that the horizontal spacing is really tight here. You could have had a slightly smaller point size to your font, or you could have had like more information on each or less information on each page and just spread it out a little bit, because like you've got all these collisions, right? So just next time, don't worry about spreading things out. It's fine. Okay. All right. So you're saying, with first player, I think you could just say like solo, right? Just say, because solo just means it'll be like the first chair player, right? And that's really beautiful. I don't remember whether that showed up in the mock-up. Yeah, and once again, you have to tell us who's playing solo. First, second? I mean, we can assume that it's the first, but you go check a published score and it will say that it's the first player. It won't just say solo, right? Unless it is a part which has only one player on it. Correct? All right, and then the answering to the little solo instruments here. Okay, so let me jump back. I was about to make a point about something. So you're going pow, and I think that you would have to put in a pausa mark here, right? So like what would be called an apostrophe or a comma, all right? And that and that's telling the conductor, allow a little bit of time for the reverb in the hall to just sort of relax, and then place this third beat of the bar for these solo players, right? So that the huge wash of sound left over by this mighty chord here doesn't just completely bury these subtle instruments, correct? Okay, so just like put in a pausa. Okay. All right, and then da 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 da. I really love this little question and answer thing going on between solo strings and flute and oboe. You know, to a certain degree, this being symphonic music, you don't even have to mark this solo, and you don't even have to mark this solo either, right? Because the assumption is when a part is isolated like that, that the player will play out. They know that they are playing a solo. They are playing a featured line rather than a solo, right? And these are featured lines, right? So the players will know. They will sense their role from the beginning. Da da da. Yeah, and once again, which clarinetist? Da 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 da. And this I really like these. You know, da da da. And good voicings, low and then high. Yeah, and this was all really nicely, just good registers on all of this. And then bassoon coming in, and then you're saying adue non legato when the cellos start. So that's probably a pretty wise decision there. And then this is a really good, a good way of getting back to the repeated section. So so really great sections A, B, and C. Now let's take a look at how they are recapitulated in the E section. And here we see that in the recapitulation that things start off pretty much the same as they were before. Here we've got the that portato that I was talking about. Why didn't you use it in the other place, right? Anyways, but about the only comment that I would make is that like if you really go to sforzando fortissimo kind of if you really go to that incredibly fierce accent, once again you are washing out this entrance, and you can hear it on the mock-up, and the mock-up is not lying to you in this case, right? Probably what would happen in real life is the conductor would just sense the fact that this was messing this up, and they would either put in a ritardando, which maybe you don't want, or they would say, okay, well, just a regular accent on the downbeat here, da da da, and then diminuendo immediately, because otherwise it's bum da 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 da. Oh, by the way, right? This is playing. And did you notice how, in your mock-up, you didn't need to mark this mezzo piano? Everything was beautifully audible, right? So that you don't really need to have those moderated dynamics in this simpler classical era scoring. Okay, so and no comments on this. Everything pretty much worked. It functioned before really, really nicely, and so it functions again, right? This is lovely, though. The you're developing your material a little bit. Development of material reflecting further contrasts is what I say in my criteria. And see, look at this. Look at this. Number 1. You don't have to mark solo, right? Right? They're just featured lines. They're not solos, right? So da 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 da, right? And not slurring over this, ba da 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 da. And here I think you could put in that tenuto mark again, da 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 da. And then as the music develops, you add the strings, right? And then you have oboe and clarinet in unison here with the second violins. Okay. And increased dynamic impact, I ask in my evaluation criteria, and you do that here, right? We got clarinets doubling seconds, a duet, and then we have, just really a mighty weight here of of flutes, a duet flutes and oboes, doubling the first violins, right? And you have a really nice build up to that with this crescendo. I feel that this is all very logical and works great. And then just right there, boom, just big crunchy fortissimos here. So I would say I didn't mention it before. I feel your use of natural horns and using just almost all open pitches is admirable. Okay, so great work. Or even also including your trumpets. Right, and then and then just lower winds and middle strings replying, and then kind of going back and forth. You made some weird mistakes here in your harmony, so fix that. And then answering pianissimo is very, very cool. Yeah, and then just a big savage contrast in dynamics. Yeah, with a nice roll there on the timpani. Yeah, very cool. Dun, 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 ba-da-da-da-dum. Once again, we have clarinet. Once again, we have that very clumsy handoff, right? Yeah, look, I mean, if you must go crescendo here to this, then this should just be forte as well, right? The handoff has to be seamless. I just don't feel that you can do this blah da, 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 da. I just don't think that works very well. Right, and then then this is the same, and just like before, I would suggest that you go da da da, so F sharp da 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 da, right, rather than go rest da da rest da da rest da da rest da da. Just much harder on the players. And notice E flat, right, not E natural, right? So shouldn't that other part be B flat, not B natural? And and just as I say in my criteria, previous approach may be the only workable strategy, right? And that's what you go for here. I love these little lines in here, the cellos and so on, and yeah, I think that all works really good. Okay, right. This is also something you could have used your C horns for. The right. Right, and then this is interesting. Piano, and then just like mezzo forte here, then piano crescendo. It's weird, but it works. Hang on, there's a little spider on my work desk, right where I want to put my fingers. Go on, little guy. You go find some critters somewhere else. All right. Okay. Yeah, and then kind of a very similar build as before. All right, and see, look, fortissimo accent, right? So you don't need to end enormously loud, right? And here, like, you don't really need like that much of a pausa, but if you put it in before, put it in here, just so that there's like that there's some kind of uniformity between the sections, right? Just a little bit of a breath, and then and really far apart flute and clarinet, but it still works great, as we can hear in the mock-up. And I really love the contrast between flute and clarinet, and then oboe and bassoon, right? So our cool instruments contrasted between our warmer instruments. And then here's that you once again just solo, right? And then back to tutti, da da da, ya da 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 da, right? And then the chord voiced higher, bum bum bum. And this is all handled really nicely. Da 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 da. Yeah, I mean, I would almost prefer right here that you went F, like the F an octave lower, just so that the oboist can start on the beat, right? Da 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 da. Right, rather than rest da 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 da. You see what I mean? It's just like there's always a chance of just kind of messing up the timing a little. And then this, of course, I love the fact that this just drops into the next part, and just all you have to do is just say first bassoon. You don't have to say solo. Just like I would say, just go through this whole score and get rid of the word solo and just put in number 1 on all these parts, right? It's symphonic music. The players will know that they're playing a solo or a featured line. Okay, that's the difference between a solo and a featured line. A solo, when you write the word solo, it demands the all the other parts in the orchestra just really, really highlighting that player, right? However, you've already scored that into the parts, so what do you need to mark solo for at all? Yeah, and then this is kind of interesting. The cello's sort of taking over. It would be nice if the bassoons finished on the A, right? All right, and then this is all cool. Da 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 ba 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 ba. Like the harmonization here, very cool. And this, these sort of wriggling clarinets and flutes. That's all very nice. Yeah, it's just like, look at how compressed this is. You can spread it out a little bit. And then a due, and then here you're going to just one player. What if it was just one player all the way through? There's no need for this to be a due. And there isn't even any need for this to be a due. Just like one clarinetist is fine. And same thing here. Just have a single player. Yeah. And then that's all fine. Bum 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 da 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 da. Yeah, and I like the, accented staccato. That's fine. You could have also used marcato marks here. So let's jump back to the development section now. Here we go. All right, and in my criteria, in the piano score, this section is more intimate, right? Is simple yet tender, right? And I love the way that you jump up an octave here. Da 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 ba ba da da da. It's really lovely. Yeah, it's just a beautiful emotional point. And there's zero need for you to have all of these parts marked differently dynamically. Right? Everybody piano, everybody crescendo to mezzo forte, right? And everybody back off to pianissimo. And then this is lovely. Boop. Boop. Okay. Okay, so what chord are we playing on this? G minor, right? G, B flat, D, and so on, right? So why is this B natural? That's not how it is in the score, right? Da 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 bum bum bum. Yeah, so just really kind of go through your work a little bit more and just, I mean, the ideal thing would be for you to not make the mistakes at the beginning, right? For some reason, if you are copy pasting certain parts from the templates and so on that I have supplied, then just really be careful before you change those notes. Make sure that you are changing them for a good reason. Right? There were actually a few other wrong notes here and there. I just didn't want to get into it too much. Okay, now if you're going to go da da it's just better for these to be separate bows. Da 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 da. So if you really want to bring this out in the middle, it's just easier as a separate bow. And in fact, it would be easy for all of these beam groups just to be separately bowed. So here you go, because here you're going da right? Da da. You know what I mean? And this leap up of an octave. You know what I mean? Just make all of these separate beam groups, the bowing on separate beam groups. Okay. All right, I do like the little conversation. I love the fact that the middle strings are an octave below the oboes, right? And then clarinets, bassoons, and cellos, and so on. Yeah, and then this is all kind of more organized traditionally. But then, occasionally, oboes and octave lower in the middle strings again. Yeah. And then building on it. It's such cool ideas here. And then pushing forwards, no need to go to mezzo piano here. Just piano. I would say piano here. Yeah, and then mezzo piano, mezzo forte. That's all fine. Maybe mezzo forte is a little early. And then so for the wind players, it's much easier for them to do these leaps and everything else than it is for because the players have got to cross strings as they play and everything else, right? And it can just be a total pain. Right, and this is kind of nice. Da 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 da. Yeah, that's very very cool. Yeah, and no big notes, no big problems with this. Bum 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 da 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 da. And just except for that, this is way too heavy of an accent. It's so massive that it will blot out this beautiful little line running downwards. Just make it an accent, and no need to make it any bigger. I mean, I get the temptation, da, da, I'm really making this point right here on the downbeat here. But there's no need to do that. It's already, Beethoven makes you feel it without actually doing it. Do you know what I mean? So just follow his lead. So, just once again, I feel that this is an example of an orchestrator evoking what they feel about Beethoven and yet leaving their own kind of personal stamp on it. Because, like a lot of decisions that you make are really, are part of your own outlook here. And that is not bad. That is not a wrong thing, right? It doesn't mean that you failed in your attempt to evoke Beethoven. I think that you did a lot of things here that are very commendable in that direction. I actually like the fact that there is a lot of your personality in this, as well as you're telling us your view of Beethoven. Of course, a lot of the decisions that you made are just very, very different from what Beethoven might have decided, right? But, and that's what makes this interesting for me, right? If everybody came up with the same solutions to everything, then how boring would that be for me, right? I mean, imagine Beethoven in multiple universes, all of those different Beethovens and the different universes deciding to orchestrate this. They would definitely each be doing it a slightly different way or a very different way, depending on the different circumstances of those universes. And that's kind of the way that I see a lot of the scores, a lot of the things that feel really authentic and yet are so different from one another, right? That's also a very, very cool thing. So I think that you walked a really good balance here, Douglas, and I just really enjoyed it. I mean, as I have with, other things that I've seen from you in the past. So it's it's like the deeper I get into this, I'm about, I guess at this point I'm about maybe 25 scores away from the end of this, more like 37 if you count the remaining compilations to do. But yeah, I just getting closer to the end of this and just feeling, oh geez, I keep telling people I'm not sure if I'll be able to do this again, and just realizing how much I'll miss it if I'm not able to. So just cross your fingers for my health to get better, okay guys? And just I would really love to maybe do a small one next year, and the one after that, and then maybe try to build back towards this strength as I cautiously move forward with my health, right? So anyway, so great work, and there's nothing really left to say on this except for you know what to do, right? Give Douglas your best in the comments below. Just please. If there's some guidance that you can pass along, or some perspectives, or even just a little praise, I think that all matters a lot. And Douglas, just to be completely fair, time for you to jump into other people's scores and give them a little feedback and thoughts and any kind of constructive comments that you think will help them. All right. So, anyways, thank you so much for being patient with me, and I'm so glad that I had a chance to look at this, and that that this challenge didn't go on hold forever, right? Because there are so many great scores and great efforts here. It would be, a shame if they hadn't been looked at and commented on and shared with the world. See you guys tomorrow. Thank you.